Okay. So just to let you know, this is one of a series of sustainability drop-in clinics we're running. So we will be running others on different topics, roughly monthly. There's a few months where we won't be running them during quiet periods, and they will be going up on the staff portal. So look out for those. And if there's any other topics you're interested in, please do sign up for those. So I'd just like to introduce Paul. Paul is in sustainability services and is our waste expert. So if I can just ask you, Paul, just to say a few words about your role at the
Yeah,
university.
yeah, sure, no problem. Well, just before I do that, I'm sitting in my office at the moment at the university. So if there's any noise or anything that happens while we're sitting here, then I apologise for that. Hopefully not too much, but that's what I'm doing. So yeah, so I work in sustainability services, which is a department within estates, and I, along with my colleagues, look after and oversee environmental management across the university. So my official title is Sustainability Officer. And then sort of subtitle, I suppose, is looking after waste, resource use, recycling, reuse of items, and those type of areas within sustainability services. So that's my area.
Brilliant.
And
Thanks, Paul.
actually, and just to say, I've been working at the university for just over 5 years now. So before that, I was at a different university, sort of doing similar things across environmental management. And before that, I was working in the automotive industry, doing environmental management as well. So if you want to know anything about cars, I can talk to you about that later. But at the moment, it's going to be waste and resources. So yeah, back to Jo.
Great, thanks, Paul. So what we've done, waste is a huge topic, and we get a lot of inquiries about various waste initiatives at the university. So what we've done is collated some of the most frequently asked questions. So I'm going to put those questions to Paul, who's going to take us through them, and that will take us about 20 to 25 minutes. And then following that, we'll have an open Q&A where you'll have opportunity to ask anything you ever wanted to about waste. So no pressure, Paul.
No
So
problem.
just to start with, the university follows the principles of the waste hierarchy. So I just wondered if you could start by taking us through the waste hierarchy for those less familiar, and just give a bit of an introduction to waste management at the university.
Yeah, sure, no problem at all. Yeah, so the waste hierarchy is something that you might have heard about before. I'm just going to put a slide up on the screen, so hopefully you'll all be able to see this. The idea of the waste hierarchy is that it's a framework, and as you can see on the slide, it's like a pyramid. The idea of sort of a pyramid. The idea of the framework is that it's actually mentioned in waste legislation. So in UK government legislation, the waste hierarchy is mentioned. And the idea is to highlight and rank the waste management options according to what is best for the environment. So in essence, it's ranking environmental impacts. So at the bottom, where we've got dispose, that's the worst environmental impact, if you like. And then as you move up the waste hierarchy, you're moving to better environmental outcomes and environmental impacts. So in essence, what we're saying is at the bottom, we've got dispose, which would be things like landfill or just straight incineration. Those are the things which are worst for the environment. So the things we want to do least, if possible, and we want to move our waste up the waste hierarchy. So the next one up above that is recover. That's mostly to do with trying to recover energy that's in waste. So in what we do in that section in terms of recover as a university, we send our general waste to an energy from waste plant where the waste is incinerated, and the heat from that runs a turbine which generates electricity. So we're recovering from that materials and from that waste energy, which is then turned into electricity. So that's recover. Above that, we've got then got recycle. So really, before we recover energy, we'd really like to recycle items if possible. So there's all sorts of different types of recycling, and no doubt we'll sort of touch on some of them as we go through. Above that, then, we would prefer, rather than recycle and rather than recover, we'd actually prefer to reuse items. And so reuse is the next section up there. And we'd we've got a whole load of ways of reusing items across the site. And again, we'll probably talk about some of those as we go through. But rather than reuse, we'd actually rather reduce the waste that we generate. So we're looking to, different ways of how can we reduce the waste that we generate across the site. And that's, again, another big section, and no doubt we'll touch on. And then finally, at the top, the best and the most environmentally friendly way is to actually prevent waste being created in the first place. So if we don't create waste, then we don't need to reuse it. We don't need to recycle it, recover or dispose of it. So actually, can we think about ways where we can actually prevent waste being created in the first place? So that's the waste hierarchy. And what we're really trying to do at the university is move waste up the waste hierarchy. So I'm going to show you a slide now, which has got some data from last academic year. So this is the data. Oh, that's gone orange. Rather, oh, there we go. That's hopefully you can see that now. So this is a table showing university's total operational waste from last academic year, and I've done it in the same order. So at the bottom we've got landfill, so the bottom of the waste hierarchy, and then moving up the table, we've got incineration, we've got energy recovery, biofuels, composting, recycling, reuse, and then that is the sort of the totality of what we measure across the university in terms of our day-to-day operational wastes. So as you can see, 1.2% of our waste got sent to landfill, and 0.8% got sent for incineration. So at the very bottom of the waste hierarchy, where we're trying to move away from those, only 2% of the university's waste was in those categories. And it tends to be that those categories are very specific types of waste. Sometimes it's down to actual legislation that we have to send some types of waste to landfill. And some types of waste have to be incinerated. So actually, those percentages there, although very small, some of them are legal obligations that we actually have to do that. And then above that, energy from waste recovery, just over 35% of our waste by weight was sent to a plant that incinerated it and then generated electricity from the heat. So that was 35%, and mostly our non-recyclable general waste across the university went down that route. A few smaller categories like cooking oil made into biofuel, green waste sent for composting, and then the next biggest section above that is food sent to anaerobic digestion. So that's where we take food waste from catering facilities, and that is sent to a process called anaerobic digestion, which in essence is where little microbes eat the food waste. They give off methane. That methane is captured, and the methane is burnt in an engine to generate electricity. And then also there's some fertilizer that comes out of the process as well. So 11% of our total waste by weight went for anaerobic digestion, and was electricity was generated from it. Next section up, 47%, 47% sent for recycling. So as I say, all sorts of different types of recycling, whether that's tin cans, plastic bottles, metal, wood, all sorts of different types of recycling take place where we send items off site, and that was 47% by weight of our waste. And then the final top category that we measure is reuse or repair. So just under 3% of items across the university from a day-to-day perspective were reused or were repaired. So for example, classroom chairs, so lecture theatre classroom chairs, there's a process where the chairs can be recovered and maybe repainted and sent back to us. So that's an example of sort of repair and reuse. So yeah, so that's the data really. And in total, we sent last year 803,000 kilograms of waste out of the university to all these different places. So that in tons, metric tons, is 803 metric tons, which is quite a lot. And as I say, difficult to sort of visualize really, I suppose. But if you imagine that an elephant weighs a few tons, maybe 5 tons, something like that, or like a large car is 2 tons, that sort of gives an idea of the amount of waste that we have. So really what we're trying to do is move the waste up the waste hierarchy. We're trying to stop waste being generated in the first place. We're trying to reuse, repair, and then, yeah, not send things to landfill if we can. But as I say, some of that legally we have to do. Just a note on carbon footprints. Waste is actually only a fraction of 1% of our total university carbon footprint. So actually, in terms of carbon footprint, the waste actually isn't very much of our carbon footprint. But obviously, the effects of waste on the natural environment can be great due to pollution, whether that's land pollution, sea, river pollution, and obviously the effects on animals and on nature, and things like microplastics, which obviously there's been a lot in the news about. So, yeah, it's a very small fraction of our carbon footprint, but obviously has massive implications globally in terms of waste. So I'm going to stop sharing that. Back to Joe. Has that answered the first question? I don't know. Are you muted, Joe? Joe, muted.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
That was great, Paul. Thank you. It did answer the question, and it was really useful to see that breakdown, because we get a lot of focus in questions around recycling, and actually it's really good to highlight that there's a number of different ways that waste is managed within the university, some with better environmental impact and some with worse. So that was really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. I liked the visualization as well, because like you say, it's quite difficult to kind of imagine what that could look like. So it might just be helpful just to touch on briefly, what areas of waste is Sustainability Services responsible for across the university, and
Yep.
what areas are excluded?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the data that I've just shown, so when I talk about operational waste, that's effectively the day-to-day waste that across the university that we generate. That doesn't include construction waste. So when I'm talking about operational waste, it doesn't include large construction projects that we have ongoing, just because from year to year, the amount of construction changes dramatically, and so that can affect the figures quite substantially. So we measure construction waste separately. So we monitor that separately. But operational waste is what we're talking about. Operational waste doesn't include certain aspects. So, for example, you'll know that the halls of residence at the university are operated by a third party, UPP. They have their own waste management systems and services. So halls of residence are not included in these figures, and we sustainability services don't look after waste recycling within halls of residence. We don't include in these figures Thames Valley Science Park or the farms, because they're sort of at arm's length from what we do in sustainability services at the moment. In terms of how we oversee waste and recycling across the university, so myself, I oversee the waste and resource use strategy and the creation of that strategy, and then the monitoring of the targets and the data within that strategy. And then we have an action plan, a 3-year action plan that has lots of different actions in there to try to meet those targets within the strategy. So oversee all of that. I also oversee the main waste management contract as well for the university. So the main waste management contract is with a local company called Select Environmental Services. So you'll no doubt see their vehicles going around site, and they do all of the collecting of the waste, the recycling from across the university, and then they take that out to other subcontractors who do the actual recycling or do the anaerobic digestion or do the incineration, etc. So I look after the main waste contract with Select, and that does cover most of the university. As I say, doesn't cover halls of residence. It doesn't cover a few other aspects. So for example, laboratories, laboratory waste, although it ends up going by Select, most of it, laboratories are looked after by technical services rather than myself. and obviously things like catering, catering waste, that comes out, and it's the catering staff who bring that out and put it into bins and receptacles. Similarly, cleaning services and portering services do most of the moving of waste from inside the buildings to outside the buildings, and putting it into the skips and bins that we have that select then empty. A few other small areas like radiological waste, asbestos, overseen by health and safety services. So those sort of specific areas. But in general, the sort of the strategy, oversight, and the main waste management contracts looked after by ourselves in sustainability.
That's great. Yeah, lots of input from others across the university, which is often the case with sustainability.
Yeah.
And there's obviously lots we can all do to support efforts in terms of improving our waste management, and recycling is the obvious one. But looking at the waste hierarchy, obviously the priority is to prevent generating waste in the first place,
Yeah.
or to reuse or repair items where possible. So I
Yeah.
just wondered if you have any tips for colleagues on what they can do to try and target those two areas first,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
support
Absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, say we do have various options in place for reuse, and I would sort of, encourage everybody to consider whether, there are unwanted items and things that occur within the department, your own department, school function, that you could offer, to other people within your department or within your wider school or function. First of all, so if something becomes unwanted, obviously if it's broken or it needs to be disposed of, that's absolutely fine. But if it's still usable, can it be used by somebody else in the department, or within the school or function? If it can't be within your own area, then we do have a number of options for trying to reuse outside of your own area. So we have the Warp It portal. So Warp It portal is for reuse of furniture and office accessories and stationery. I'm just going to bring up my window here. That's not the right window. That is Warp It, but that's my view of Warp It as an admin. So that's not really what I meant to show you. Hang on, sorry. I will just get back the other one. But Warp It is a portal where staff can advertise furniture, as I say, or office accessories for other people within the university to claim. On the sustainability homepage, this is our homepage that you can get to from reading.ac.uk/sustainability. And if you go to the recycling tab at the top and go to Let's Reuse More, and then there's some reuse options come up here, but the one we're going to talk about at the moment is Warp It. So if you want to find out more about Warp It, then there's plenty of information on here. But in essence, Warp It is like eBay. It's an online portal where you can register for it, and then if you've got items within your office that you don't need anymore, you can put the details up onto Warp It, and then anybody across the university who is also on Warp It can find those items and can claim them, and then they can be reused in a different school or function. So Warp It's really useful. There's lots of information again on the website about Warp It and how it works. Lots of sort of Q&As at the bottom here as well, so you can go through that and find out more about Warp It. There's other aspects such as, when we talked about not generating waste in the first place, is it possible that a service can be provided by a supplier? So rather than the university purchasing items from a supplier, is it possible that a service can be provided by a supplier that does the same thing that you would want if you were going to actually purchase an item or something? And it may be that our procurement colleagues can help in that, and sort of look at other options for providing a service rather than actually purchase of items. So that's another option. There's plenty to talk about, but I think we need to move on probably next to another question. So let's close that down. Back to you,
That's
Jo.
brilliant. Thank you. We moving on to recycling, we get a lot of inquiries about why the university doesn't currently collect and recycle soft plastics. And I know this is something you've explored in detail. So I just wondered if you could give a bit of an outline of
Yeah.
what the conclusions of that were.
Sure. So obviously, when we're looking at waste management, when we're looking at recycling, much of this has a cost to it. You know, much of this does cost the university money. So we're obviously looking at both environmentally and financially at options. So and we are, you know, weighing up the environmental benefits of doing something and the financial benefits of doing something, and we have to obviously take those into consideration, both of them. So when it comes to soft plastics, the main issues with soft plastics are that they're so lightweight. So obviously, if you scrunch up soft plastics, you've got a lot of air potentially that gets trapped in there as well. And even if you sort of layer it out, you get a lot of air in. They're very lightweight. So what that means is it's expensive per volume to actually deal with soft plastics, either in terms of transporting them or treating them or recycling them. So if you think of a supermarket, for example, so obviously a lot of supermarkets do have collections for soft plastics. They have the real advantage in that when their delivery vehicles deliver all of the items to a supermarket, they're generally going back empty to the logistics center where they came from. And so they can put a huge volume of soft plastics back into there, along with cardboard, along with other things that they're taking back to their logistics center. But they can put it in there and it's pretty much free transport because those vehicles came full, they're going back empty. So it's pretty cheap for them to do that, and it's a relatively environmentally friendly way of doing it because the vehicles would generally go back empty anyway. So using that, they can do massive volumes, and actually when they then deal with the huge volumes of plastic, they have a financial advantage as well to do that. At the university, although it might seem we get through lots of plastic, we don't get through anything near like what a supermarket would get through. So from our perspective, it's actually it would be very expensive to actually try to recycle soft plastics. Our waste management company have looked into it, and even they, as a waste management company, sort of bringing together all of the soft plastics from all their users that they have a contract with, even they can't find it to be very financially cost effective either. So it is really a problem of the cost element to it. It can potentially be recycled. There is a bit of a question about sort of soft plastics, where they go. Do they get recycled in the UK or not? But generally speaking, it is a financial element to it that just for us at the moment is just too expensive to make it worthwhile, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's increasing in awareness, but there's obviously a lot of complexities to it. It's
Yeah.
not quite as straightforward as it sounds. And how about food waste? We get similar questions about food waste across campus.
Yeah. So we do collect food waste, and we do collect the vast majority of food waste from catering facilities. So our colleagues in catering, they do collect both front of house food waste, so i.e. from the canteens, from the restaurants, that is plate waste, if you like, but also actually the biggest chunk of it is from back of house, so from food preparation. Um, and with catering now cooking a lot of their own items, you know, rather than bringing in frozen food, they're actually now cooking much more of their items. That means that they're actually producing more peelings, you know, vegetable peelings, and, you know, things like cauliflower leaves, for example, which, if you imagine a cauliflower, actually the leaves are actually quite a lot of the cauliflower in some senses. So they are creating a lot of food waste, but that is all collected. That is collected by the catering staff, put into wheelie bins, and collect that from all of the catering facilities and take that off to anaerobic digestion, which, as I mentioned before, is then goes through to generate electricity. What we don't do at the moment is collect food separately from offices. And again, the main reason for that, or one of the main reasons, is that, as I said before, none of our waste actually goes to landfill that's collected from offices. So the general waste that where we ask people to put food waste in offices doesn't go to landfill. It goes to an energy from waste plant where it generates electricity. And actually, if we were to put in separate food waste collections into all of our offices, we would have to put in extra bins, extra collections by the cleaning team, extra extra external bins for Select to then pick up and put into their vehicles, extra vehicle movements. And actually, when you add up all of that extra cost and extra resource in terms of the plastic for the bins and the staff time, etc., we're not convinced that actually we would get a better outcome than what we're doing currently with the general waste going to an energy from waste plant and generating electricity, which is what the anaerobic digestion does as well. So at the moment, we're looking at that and analysing and keeping an open mind on it going forward. And we are rolling out food waste into certain other areas like food and nutrition sciences. We've rolled out into there this year because they generate food within their research and their operations. But at the moment, not directly in offices.
Okay, no, that's great. Just a couple of very quick questions before we move on to kind of an open Q&A. What does the university recycle that colleagues might not be aware of? Those kind of less obvious things that are not the regular bins dotted around campus.
Yeah, sure. So we do actually recycle quite a lot of different things. So let me just again share my screen here, and I can show you what we do. There we go. Hopefully that one will pop up. So again, this is within the recycling tab at the top of the page. It's the What Can I Recycle page. So if you click on that, you'll get the three main sort of recycling types that we have in the offices at the university. But below that, there's more information then about other items that we recycle. So glass, confidential waste, paper, batteries, electrical items, IT equipment, printer cartridges, fridges, freezers, wood, metal, mobile phones, fluorescent tubes, cooking oil. Those are the main ones, but then beyond that, there's a whole load of others. And within our A to Z of waste and recycling, which you can click on there, there's again lots more information about all the different types of items that we can deal with, either in terms of recycling or how to dispose of them correctly. And you can click down on the more button and it gives you a whole load of information. So if you do want to know anything specific, go into the A to Z of waste and recycling. Hopefully that gives you more information. But yeah, all sorts of different things that we've started. And the latest one from our catering facilities is Tetra Paks. So we're also just started that a couple of months ago. At the moment, that's just directly from catering. But again, we sort of keep an open mind as to what we do with that going forward.
That's brilliant. And yeah, it's really good to see that big list. And I'd encourage everyone, staff and students on the call today to share that with colleagues, because there's probably things that people are unaware of that we actually can recycle. So just one final quick question before we open up to the audience. What would be your sort of one takeaway tip for colleagues to improve their waste reduction or waste management practices at work or at the university?
Yeah, I think probably maybe what we've just said really, there's a lot of detail on the website here, which I know not everybody's been aware of necessarily. But actually to read these details, and if you've got a specific item that you have in your hand or that comes up, to sort of find out what you can do with that. And then it's reading the labels on the bins. I always sort of encourage people to just have a look at the labels to make sure that you know what you're putting in the general waste and in the recycling bins that are situated around the campus. And really, if you've got any questions or any information, you want any more information or anything is unclear, send an email to waste@reading.ac.uk, and we can answer your questions and get back to you.
Brilliant. So we've now got about 15, possibly up to 20 minutes, depending on how many questions we get, for sort of an open Q&A. So this is your chance to ask Paul anything else you'd like to know about waste at the university. So yeah, feel free to just unmute and ask a question or pop it into the chat box, and we'll let Paul answer those. Hi, I can see Prodromus, you've got your hand up. Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, my question is not directly related. Sorry, I'm a student, study real estate at university already. Um, but I guess I would like to ask, how do you make sure you prevent greenwashing, when, trying to create sustainable methods and report them at the same time?
Mhm. So do you mean sort of greenwashing in terms of the data that we produce, or greenwashing in terms of our subcontractors and where we send items?
The subcontractors mainly.
Subcontractors, yeah, okay. So again, in terms of how we work with Select Environmental Services, as I say, our main waste contractor, we have what's called a duty of care. So again, in legislation, there's this concept called duty of care, and the idea of duty of care is that as a waste producer, the university should be able to follow the waste that we generate through the disposal processes that happen via our main waste contractor, via our sub-waste contractors, etc. So one of the main things that we do with Select is that we actually audit our subcontractors. So every few years, we undertake what we call duty of care audits, where myself and our account manager from Select, and also potentially business partners, will actually go to our subcontractors and actually check and look at what they're doing with the waste that we send to them. So literally 2 weeks ago, I was at a subcontractor who deals with our waste electrical equipment. And we actually go onto their site, we see what they do, we look at their documentation, we check in terms of how they deal with items, where those end up, and again, make sure that they've got all the right permits, that they've got the correct legislation that they're following, etc. So we do have this process of duty of care, which is all to do with making sure we're legally compliant, but also know that what we're doing is environmentally sound as well. So really the main thing that we do is the duty of care audits. And we also encourage our suppliers to become accredited to ISO 14001, which is the environmental management system, the International Environmental Management System. So the university is ISO 14001 accredited, and Select Environmental System Services are 14001 accredited. And that's again a really good framework to make sure that you're doing things that you're supposed to be doing, that you're complying with the legislation, that you're saying the right things that you're supposed to be saying, and that you're not greenwashing. So I think those two things between them are really solid things that we do.
Very well,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks, Paul. We've got a question in the chat from
Yep.
Julia. Thanks, Julia. So appreciate the financial constraints of the soft plastic recycling, but is there a possibility of a partnership with the on-campus co-op to increase the size of their soft plastic bins so that more teams can drop off their soft plastics there more regularly?
Yes, so I mean that is an idea that a couple of people have had, and so yeah, that is actually being looked looked into at the moment. So one of our colleagues is actually asking the co-op about that at the moment and seeing if that is a possibility. Obviously, the co-op are a tenant on site, so they're not part of the university, but yeah, maybe a partnership is possible with them, and we were sort of waiting to see what they say back on that one.
Brilliant. So watch this space on that one.
Thank you.
Another question from Paulina. How does the university deal with aspects associated to cleaning food packaging when discarding it?
Mm-hmm.
And how does the university deal with mixed material errors in discarding?
Yeah. Okay, so I'll answer the second question first. What we have got, and working with our colleagues in portering services and cleaning services, is a few years ago we changed the way that we actually put sacks into waste and recycling bins. So the majority now of waste and recycling bins have got clear sacks in them. So if you look in bins around the site, you'll see that the vast majority, hopefully, of bins have got clear sacks in. What that's enabled is that when the cleaning staff empty bins, they can actually look into the sack, in essence, through the clear plastic, look into it and see what's inside. And we have a process where they actually assess the sacks and decide whether they can go into the recycling because they're not contaminated, or whether there's too much contamination in there and they have to go into a general waste facility. So the clear sack policy enables us to try to get around that aspect of errors in discarding. We can't, the cleaning services team can't go through everything and take things out of sacks and put them in other sacks. That's just not possible in terms of the amount of waste that there is. But they do have this process now to actually be able to put some waste in one direction if it's not contaminated, then and then contaminated waste in another direction. The materials recycling facilities are able to deal with certain amount of contamination. So they generally talk around 5%. So if there's 5% contamination, they can deal with that. So there is a bit of leeway on that. In terms of cleaning of food packaging, yeah, I mean, that's a difficult one. Obviously, if you've got opportunity to clean food packaging and put any waste food into the general waste bin, and then or into a food waste bin if you're in a catering facility, and then put the cleaner packaging material into the mixed recycling, that's good. If that's not feasible, then yes, put it in the general waste bin. And yeah, contamination is an issue, but we've got these ways of trying to deal with it. And if you can decontaminate it yourself, then that's great. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Paul. Another question, which I'm glad came up actually, is it was one we had on, depending on how much time we had for the first part, but about vapes and disposal of vapes at battery collection points, because there's been a lot in the media, hasn't there, about lots of them being single use, not recyclable, they've got batteries in them. So what's your take on the situation with vapes?
Yeah, this is a complex one, unfortunately. Obviously, in terms of vapes, it's better to use refillable vapes, if possible. So, if it's possible to use refillables as opposed to single use, then that's obviously preferable. In terms of can they be disposed of, or where can they be disposed of, and can they be recycled? They, generally speaking, need to be kept separate from other batteries, unfortunately. The reason for that is that the batteries in the vapes are embedded within the vape itself, so you can't really get the battery out, generally speaking, if it's a single-use vape, and they have to be treated in a different way to batteries. They effectively have to be disassembled first, and so actually, really, we ought to be keeping them separate. But it's very difficult to put in lots of vape collection points across the university, so it's better to put them in battery recycling rather than general waste, or recycling or other recycling. So put them in there. Yes, if possible, keep them separate. And we could we've got a with the library, for example, we're going to the library every so often and picking up those vapes and putting them into a separate collection point. So yeah, email waste at Reading if you've got an issue with vapes or you want to know more, but generally speaking, yeah, don't put them into general waste or normal recycling. Battery recycling is better, but it's better to keep them separate if possible.
Yeah, or as Joanna's just said here, or we can discourage people from vaping.
Essentially, but obviously there's issues around all of that. So.
Of course.
So
probably got time for one more question, which has come from Joanna. So how do we get our colleagues to separate their waste effectively? We generally have 2 bins, general and paper waste, but what about cups and other plastics, etc.?
Okay, that's an interesting one. I'd like to know potentially where it's only general and paper, because so maybe that's something specific, Joanna, you can contact us on afterwards, just email waste, because what we try to do is have at least a general waste and a mixed recycling bin, and in a mixed recycling bin you can put paper and cardboard into it. So if we have separate paper and cardboard bins, we try to then have 3 bins, so a general waste, a mixed recycling and a paper and cardboard bin, we try not to have just a general and a paper bin. So if there is a location which is just a general and a paper,
do you want to
sorry,
just
there
come
are
back?
three. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So in essence, yeah, there are three generally. So that's what we try to do. If there's sometimes there's only two, which is the general waste and the mixed recycling, and you can put paper and cardboard in the mixed recycling. In terms of other things, cups, again, the volume of paper cups that we have, there just isn't enough of them to have a paper cups recycling in every office. So we do tend to have paper cups recycling bins in main foyers of buildings, so main building foyers, and so if you've got one of those in your main building, then yeah, it's to take the paper cups to that in the main foyer. It's a bit awkward, but yeah, we just haven't got the volume to be able to put them into every office, and obviously we're trying to stop using paper cups as much as possible, so the volumes are going down and down and down anyway. Other plastics, so harder plastics, and plastic bottles can go in the mixed recycling. Talked about already, obviously soft plastics. If there's any specific types of plastics that you have got an idea about, then again, get in contact, because we do have some specific types of plastic collections, particularly from labs. Yeah, but again, a lot can go in the mixed recycling in terms of the hard plastics, at least anyway.
And the
Thank
point
you.
on cups is interesting, isn't it? Because we've had a lot of success with getting an increase in use of reusable cups with the tax on using disposable cups. And
Yes.
I just wanted to point out as well, you know, because we get a lot of attention on reusable coffee cups, but the same is true for water bottles. There's now lots of hydration stations across campus where you can refill your water bottle. So we'd really encourage everyone to encourage colleagues to use reusable water bottles as well as reusable cups wherever possible. But I appreciate there's not always it's not always possible, but where you can.
Yeah, just in terms of single use versus reusables, there's a general figure that is in the waste industry that says to be more environmentally beneficial using reusables than single use, you have to reuse an item at least 15 times before it becomes better than actually having single use items. So if you do have and you know, you're talking to people about reuse, really do need to be reusing items more than 15 times each to have that environmental benefit of reuse. So that is something just to bear in mind. It's all well and good as obviously having lots of reusable things around, but you actually do have to reuse them to have the have the benefit. So 15 times, 15 times is generally the sort of the number bandied around, but it's different for different items.
Yeah, but it's a really useful point and a really useful stat. And yeah, I guess what we don't want to do is end up with a whole shelf of reusable cups and they just sit on the shelf not being used, because that's even worse for the environment. So good point.
Exactly.
Okay, we probably could just squeeze in one more question if anyone has any more burning questions. If not, we'll wrap up. No? Okay, well, thank you all for joining. And just to say that this is one of our Green Festival events. Hopefully you've been able to get out to some of the others over the last couple of days, and we've got colleagues over in the library today as part of Green Festival as well. So try and get over there and check that out if you're able to. And this has been recorded and will be shared to all attendees who've joined today. And we're going to put it onto our sustainability YouTube channel, so it will be available more widely to staff and students to access in the future. So thanks very much. And thanks, Paul, for all the really useful information, which I think has been really helpful to staff and students today. Thank you.
No problem. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.